Or you do it after. Hallmark of a democratic society. Several questions have been posed by members of the opposition to the government. Today, we will be speaking with leader of the opposition, Mr. Joseph Harmon. Some of those questions today in the National Assembly, the answers were given, but these answers to the questions that were asked leave much to be desired. Mr. Joseph Harmon, good afternoon to you, sir. All
Ministers provided answers to questions which were asked by APNU-AFC members of parliament. These questions are meant to elicit responses from the ministers on issues which they would not ordinarily put into the public domain. And so these questions are meant to ferret out the answers that the public need to know and inquiring minds need to know. And so when these questions are asked, one would expect that with respect to accountability and transparency, that the ministers will be happy to answer these questions because that is why that they are sitting on what is called public trust. And that if you are the guardians of public trust, then you must ensure that the public can trust the information you give to them. Now, this is some examples of what I call a breach of public trust. First of all, in fact, you recall several weeks ago, there was a question asked by our Shadow Minister for Home Affairs of the Minister of Home Affairs. And that question had to do with the identity of those persons who had been released from the prison on the instruction of the PBP regime. The answer came several weeks later, and the answers that were provided did not put the public in any better place than they were before the questions were asked. So, for example, of 92 persons who were released, until now, the minister has been stonewalling, providing an accurate answer to the question. So the Guyanese public knows that 92 persons who were serving criminal sentences had been released from incarceration. but they don't know who these persons are. And the point I made on an earlier program was that they are citizens who might have given evidence in cases in which those persons were convicted and would now feel very much afraid because they are not too sure whether the persons against whom they gave evidence in the court would have been now released at the pleasure of His Majesty Irfan Ali and His Majesty Robeson Ben. This is what has happened. This is a trust. This is what I call a breach of public trust. And the public still don't know who these people are. And so when you start to see things happening, you have to be able to make linkages. When you see the Police Service Commission office burglarized and certain documents and flash drives are missing, then you know that there is a criminal element that's operating out there that might very well be getting the directions from persons who have an interest in what is happening in the Police Service Commission. To add to that today, Member of Parliament, Mr. Kemra Jamjatan, posed some questions to the Minister of Agriculture. Well, this Minister of Agriculture is a boastman. He goes all about the place, boasting about this and boasting about that. Last week, we went to the Pomeroon, and we saw people who had been flooded out from since October of 2020. And neither the central government or the Regional Democratic Council had seen it fit to visit those persons. But shortly after the news of our visit came out, he then went onto the media to say, oh, we had spent over $8 million in that area. But $8 million on what? Where is the money spent? Certainly not in those communities that we visited. So this minister is known for his gregarious way, and the statements that he makes are, they're so loud. Goes all around the country. He's like the other zealot, Lal, who believes that he is the answer to everything. If you want to have down rubber trees, no, don't cut down rubber trees. You want to build a bus shed for $40,000. He said, no, take $2 million and build it. That is the kind of accountability that we're having now. And this is why I say that these occupants of public office are behaving in a manner that's not in keeping with public trust. Exactly. Now, with respect to the particular matters today, the questions were asked by Mr. Ramjitan had to do with the issuance of 2 trawler licenses. You know, there's an embargo on the issuing of trawler license because it has to do with the number of licenses each country can issue in a particular period. And so for trawler licenses to be issued, you have to go through a process. The licensees have to be vetted, and they have to go through an entire vetting process by the Ministry of Agriculture, and more particularly Department of Fisheries in this case. And so when we learned that these 2 brand new licenses were issued, Mr. Ramjitan asked the question of the minister. First question he asked, to whom were these 2 trawler licenses issued for the year 2020-2021 by the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries Department? So you're now talking about the PVP regime going into office in August, and by December of 2020, they already issued 2 brand new trawler licenses which were actually on pause for many years. But this was the answer which the Honorable Minister gave. And I mean, any right-thinking person, and now I want to address the students who are writing grade 6. And you tell me whether you consider this to be an answer which your teacher will give you a star on. This is the question. To whom were the 2 trawler licenses issued for the year 2020-2021 by the Ministry of Agriculture Fisheries Department? Answer, They were issued to a well-established Guyanese operator in the fishing industry who was duly qualified to receive the said licenses, who complied with the requisite procedure and satisfied all the legal requirements in relation thereto. What's the answer there? You have gotten nothing from the minister, a lot of verbiage. It's as if, this is all intended to confuse. But Guyanese people are not confused. We are not easily confused. And so this attempt to hide the identity of the persons who were granted these licenses, it is the same way that Ben has gone about trying to hide the identity of the persons who were released from incarceration. It is the same methodology, but this will not stand. Further, let me go on to some other questions which the Honorable MP asked, and I'll give you the answers again. And you tell me if out of 10, you would give you more than one. Question: was any due diligence conducted on these licensees to verify a meritorious grant thereof? Answer: I know, this is the minister speaking, the Minister of Agriculture. I know of no requirement for due diligence to be conducted on the license. In the Ministry of Agriculture, as indeed every ministry in our government, decisions are based on meritocracy and not on caprice, nor extraneous, nor irrelevant considerations. Now, anybody who has ever received a license for anything, a trawler license or anything, will know that you have to go through a process. At least you have to fill out a form that shows your name, address, date of birth, whether you're a criminal or not, whether you have the money to be able to operate this thing. Any child will know that. So this answer that he gives here basically is giving away a mindset of the PPP regime, that they don't do no due diligence. If they want to give you like, say, come and get it, and that's it. This is the way they are managing the affairs of this state. And this is why we have to get rid of them as quickly as possible. The next question: if there were any due diligence done, could the Honourable Minister provide copies of this to this Honourable House of the said due diligence report? Answer: as indicated above, the question is misconceived and erroneous, as due diligence cannot be done on a license. Well, this is the most atrocious piece of trash I've ever read. Every license must have some due diligence. Every license, even if you're going to get a motor car license, they have to go through certain processes. They ask you certain questions. You have to fill out a form. So when he says there's no due diligence, this just goes to show why we are having these problems with security in our state. This is why tons and tons of cocaine can pass through this country to different destinations, because there's no need for due diligence. Come on, just pass through. Everybody will want to pass. Let the cocaine pass, let the ganja pass, and everything pass. Let the license pass. The next question the minister asked, and this is where I found the most arrogant. The minister, the MP asked, was the Guyana Association of Trawler Owners and Seafood Processors consulted in any way prior to this grant of the 2 trawler licenses? The answer: in the same manner that you were not required to consult licensed firearm holders before you handed out hundreds of gun licenses, there is equally no requirement to consult with trawler owners and seafood processors for the grant of new license. Notwithstanding, the Ministry of Agriculture consults on a regular basis with each and every sector which falls under the administration of the ministry. These consultative engagements are publicized regularly in the media, and were you attentive, you would have so observed. Now, what manner of man or woman would write an answer like this at the level of the National Assembly? And it just goes to show the level to which the PPP as a party has sunk to find people to put in high political offices. This answer here, a child in sixth grade would get a fail for it. And this is a person who sits there as a minister and with the pomposity would say, just as you did not ask for any issues with respect to gun license, well, I don't have to ask anything for the license. This is the PPP that we face, my dear brothers and sisters. This is the epitome of a lack of trust in public office. We cannot trust the PPP regime with our national patrimony. They're giving it away with no due diligence. And so we have to be very, very careful as Guyanese that what we are seeing happening on the streets of Guyana and in the hallways of central government and regional government power, that we have to stand up and face it and condemn it where we see it. This answer is clearly a violation of national trust, and the public interest is damaged by virtue of what this minister has said to the questions asked by Mr. Ramjita.
Excellent.
So that will be my wrap on it, Chris.
All right. I'm pretty certain that in terms of the answer, knowing who are the individuals that received the license, those names are in the possession of the opposition members, I assume.
Well, of course, there's a saying which we have in law. Never ask a question unless you know the answer.
Excellent.
So let me leave that there. Mr. Ramjan is an attorney of long standing. So that those persons who feel that they can hide behind this piece of paper that has been provided by the Minister of Agriculture must know fully well that we were expecting him to do the honorable thing and say to the Guyanese public who these persons are. But since he is not prepared to do so, we will find ways and means of getting that information to the public.
Very well. Very good. All right. I'll allow you to take your leave, Mr. Harmon. We'll continue the discourse with Member of Parliament, Mr. Jeremy Figueira, in just a few minutes. So quickly, for those of you just joining the program, that was essentially a statement by Opposition Leader Mr. Joseph Harmon as it relates to several questions that were posed to members of the government by the APNU-AFC members of Parliament. And of course, as Mr. Harmon rightfully mentioned, the answers to those questions leave much to be desired. Note that in a democracy that the PPP love to chant about, in a democracy, there is expectation of transparency and accountability. And the only way the general populace can know where their resources are going is based on the answers that have to be provided by those persons who currently occupy the ministerial seats. Again, several questions were posed by the opposition members of Parliament. And of course, the answers that Mr. Harmon read out to us leaves much to be desired. But of course, we ask the general public, you be the judge. You be the judge. Could you consider this transparency in government? Could you consider this democracy? That a question is asked specifically as it relates to trawler license and who the persons or the beneficiaries of those licenses, and to receive an answer such as, to quote the response from the Minister of Agriculture, in the same manner that you were not required to consult licenses firearm holder before hundreds or thousands of gun licenses were. That is the response to a question that was asked as it relates to who are the beneficiaries of trawler license. All right, we continue the discourse happening in the National Assembly today. A motion is currently being debated to seek the first reading of a bill which was submitted by APNU-AFC Member of Parliament, Mr. Sherrod Duncan. And that bill is essentially the Narcotics Bill of 2020. Mr. Jeremy Figueira, who served in the 11th Parliament and now is a member in the 12th Parliament, will be able to confirm to us that indeed this motion was first introduced by APNU-AFC Member of Parliament, Mr. Carrington. So it is essentially an APNU-AFC bill. But of course, due to time, it was not brought to the floor of the National Assembly. But of course, through Sherrod Duncan, same AP and UAFC Member of Parliament, it has been brought now. Mr. German Figuera, the Member of Parliament from Region 10, had the opportunity earlier this morning to put on the floor his statement as it relates to the supporting of the motion. Mr. Figuera, good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi, hi, thank you, Sherrod. Um, we believe that the issue concerning the incarceration of persons in possession of marijuana, small quantities of that, the time has come for us to make some amendments to that legislation that never changed since 1988. And it is something that the population would have put to us while we were in government. And as a result of that, we would have put together a bill that was on the order paper for us to give serious consideration and pass it. Time, however, didn't permit for us to look into the aspect of that, but it remained a very important issue for us. And as a result of such, and more uh, conversations that we would have had with the public, not only the Rastafarian community, but a lot of young people in particular, because the notion is, I mean, one person hear of marijuana or ganja, you automatically you think of the Rasta man or the Rasta woman, or you think of the ghetto youth, or someone who's a drug dealer, and automatically one thinks of the possibilities of jail. But when you look at this legislation, how it was formulated since 1988, for 15 grams, persons could have been incarcerated for 3 years. And I'm talking young people who now experiencing their teens, their early 20s, being caught with a spliff basically, would have been incarcerated for 3 years of their lives. Productive years being wasted in our view because they were found with this small quantity in their possession, placed before the courts and sentenced for 3 years
Hmm?
for a 300 or a $500 split, so to speak.
Okay.
But one must also look to the realities that pertains in the world today. The world is relaxing the penalties on the use of cannabis. It is now an economic um, base for a lot of countries. I mean, several states in the US have recorded millions of dollars in the sale of cannabis. This bill, in its stage as it is, and our intention as the opposition, is to bring several additional amendments to this bill. But right now, we believe the punitive measures of the bill should be addressed, as well as the quantity of that should be in possession of the user of this cannabis. And we're saying 15 grams is grossly insufficient because it's 3 years someone will have to serve in prison. And if one is to look at how much it costs the state to take care of one prisoner per day, I was told by senior prison officers it costs the state $1,500 to feed one prisoner, one criminal per day. So you are incarcerating a young person for $300 split to spend 3 years in prison at the cost of $1,500 a day. It doesn't make economical sense. It is like what the PPP is doing with Gaisuku, plundering taxpayers' money in a failed corporation at the expense of taxpayers. The production cost for sugar compared to the selling price of sugar on the world market. Ghana is losing billions of dollars, but the government care less. So we're saying we heard the views expressed by the population. We would have engaged a number of young people. We would have engaged the Rastafarian community, and we would have had these consultations. And out of that, we put together this bill seeking for the quantity to be raised from 15 grams to 500 grams. And the, we take away the punitive measures. So persons in possession of this amount would not be uh, placed before the courts and more so incarcerated, affecting their families. Because a lot of these people who are incarcerated, sometimes they're the sole breadwinner for the family. But we're looking at the productive years of young people who are victims of this draconian legislation. And we're saying it's time for us to amend these legislation to the benefit of our young people. I mean, if we look right in the region, Jamaica has done it. Trinidad and Barbados have indicated that they will be looking to amend this legislation as well. But it's not limited to the region. It is a discussion that is happening internationally. Europe is having this conversation. America is having this conversation. And other countries of prominence in the world is having this conversation of how to benefit from the use of marijuana, be it medicinal or economically from the sale of it, even though it might be on a controlled basis. The fact of the matter is, the world has a different response rate. But when you look at the legislation in Ghana with regards to this punitive measure, a person found with um, 20 ton of cocaine, for example, they are being given the same penalty as one found with 15 grams of marijuana. And we're saying that is grossly unacceptable. It's inconceivable that we took so long, in my view, to address this matter. And yes, the PPP is saying that you were in government for 5 years. Why you didn't do it? They were in government for 23 years. Didn't do anything. We started the process. We had the consultation with the masses. We formulated the bill under Mr. Carrington, former MP, and we put it on the order papers. Now we're saying we would have had further discussions with the masses, and they asked us to do this, and we're doing this on their behalf because you are there to serve the people. And that is what we want the Guyanese people to understand, that this bill, and we are cognizant that the PPP will not um, adhere to our proposal. And if one would have had the opportunity to look at this, I think the Stabrook newspaper this morning, the Attorney General is proposing 30 grams instead of what we are proposing. We're saying we believe a larger quantity should have been facilitated. We have proposed 500, and the PPP just want to, for some reason, take this proposal that we would have done and run with it as if it was theirs. But we started this initiative. We believe it's a worthwhile initiative, and we will continue to pursue to ensure that the Rastafarian community and the young people and all users of cannabis are afforded an opportunity to use it in a discretionary manner and not be able to be penalized for being in possession of such quantities. So we're happy that our objective is going to be achieved, even though we didn't get in totality the amount we wanted, because PPP wants to ride this as if it is their own. But we're saying we listen to the masses, we listen to the young people, we listen to the Rastafarian community, and we would have taken this a step further in getting punitive measures taken away from this legislation so the persons can
I
be in
want,
possession
yeah,
of
I
more
want to
than
just interject
um,
here.
15 grams.
Right. I want to quickly interject here. Would you support, because essentially the bill is before the House. So essentially all that is required now, if, for example, the government has a different amount that they are recommending, would you recommend that the bill that is submitted by Sherrod Duncan, the APNU AFC, that goes to a special select committee in which will comprise members of the APNU AFC and the People's Progressive Party Civic, so that those amount that they are suggesting at that committee level, you can come to some consensus and then present back the bill to the House. Um, I know for fact you are cognizant that the PPP has a majority. And it appears that by the end of this afternoon, the PPP would, what you would say in politics, they will steal a march, because there is already in the House a piece of legislation that will be tabled this afternoon, that will be introduced this afternoon, which is the exact same title as Sharon Duncan's APNU AFC's bill. So we're saying this now so all and sundry can be aware that currently in the Assembly there is the debate on, as it relates to the motion to introduce the narcotics bill tabled by Sharon Duncan, which was initially tabled by Mr. Carrington, APNU AFC Member of Parliament, a few years ago. But we are seeing now in the National Assembly a document that has been served to all members of Parliament, which is the exact APNU AFC narcotics bill that by the end of this afternoon, the PPP will essentially, as you would say in politics, they will be stealing a march. Would you recommend the Special Select Committee?
Of course, Chris. I mean, that is the common sense approach. We have done the legwork. We would have consulted with the masses of the Guyanese. Most of our constituency or support base that have been the victims of this draconian legislation would have approached us. So one would want to believe good sense would prevail, and the PPP would definitely take this to the special select committee to have further deliberations in it. And I know that you, as a chief, whip, would have already signaled your desire for this to happen. So it is a matter of the PPP being mature, because we represent arguably more than half of the population, and that is before the courts. So you cannot ignore the opposition when it comes to matters of importance to the nation. And we hold the view that a matter of this magnitude of importance, where we would have done the work, we are saying good sense dictate that the government engage us to have a sensible approach in carving out a consensus on the way forward with this legislation. I am happy in the debates, it has been articulated by a number of the speakers that they, in some regard, do support our proposal with respect to not having persons be incarcerated. The matter on the floor where they have some disagreements is on the quantity. So essentially, we would have one leg of putting together this bill. But I'm saying, and you two would agree, that we should have consultation in the special select committee on this bill, so that we as a collective have a general consensus that we all can agree with, to put to the masses out there, so that they could understand that this was a collective decision. This is not about who win and who's responsible. The world know, Guyanese know, that the coalition is responsible for this legislation. We are the ones, in less than 5 years, put this proposal to government to consider. We didn't wait 10 years, we didn't wait 20 years, we didn't wait 23 years. We did it under our tenure. We're saying we led the footwork, we have the data, and we're saying the prudence dictate and good sense dictate that you have consultation with the opposition, so that we can eke out a quantity, so to speak, that we all can have consensus on going forward.
Excellent. All right, Jeremy Figueroa, we'll have to leave it there. Viewers, this has been Lunch Break. And of course, we have been speaking with Opposition Leader Mr. Joseph Harman and, of course, Member of Parliament Mr. Jeremy Figueroa. The debate continues in the National Assembly as it relates to the introduction of the narcotics bill, which has been tabled by the APNU AFC Member of Parliament Mr. Sherrod Duncan. As we mentioned to you earlier, the operator can relieve Mr. Jeremy Figueroa. As we mentioned to you earlier, we have seen pieces of legislation that has been served to all of the members of Parliament from the People's Progressive Party Civic with the exact same name of the APNU AFC's bill. So we rather suspect by the close of the debates here at the National Assembly this afternoon, we would see what we would refer to in politics that the PPP would essentially steal a march, and that is steal the bill which has been submitted by Mr. Carrington a few years ago and resubmitted by Mr. Sherrod Duncan by the close of this afternoon. Of course, colleagues Sherrod Duncan and Randolph Critchlow will pick it up back this afternoon at the 5 o'clock rush hour to bring you the result of the debate from the National Assembly. Until then, my name is Christopher Jones, thanking you very much for joining me on lunch break. Until we meet tomorrow at 12 o'clock, have a pleasant rest of your day. Goodbye for now.